Parshas Vayigash, finding Hashem in the dark, is very similar to what we spoke about last time when we talked about Hanukkah. But here it's really about the story about the Jews going down to Egypt. Bnei Yisrael, literally the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, the children of Yaakov Avinu, descend to Egypt in this week's Parsha. And it's not just Bnei Yisrael, but Yisrael himself, Yaakov Avinu. You discover the angst that he is experiencing in his realization that he is now part of this divine plan to get the Jewish people into Egypt. And you find this at the beginning of Perek Mem Vav of chapter 46, where the Torah says, Vayisa Yisrael v'chol asher lo, vayavo be'era shava. That Yisrael comes with everything, and he comes down to Beersheva. He's now moving southward so that he can move to Egypt. Vayizbach zivachim le'lokei aviv Yitzchak, and he offers sacrifices to the father, to the God of his father Yitzchak. Now Rashi asks the question. Rashi says le'lokei aviv Yitzchak. So Rashi says in source number 2, Chayav Adam bichvod aviv yoser michvod zikeno. That a person is obligated to show more honor to his father than to his grandfather. Lefichach tala b'Yitzchak v'lo ba'Avraham. And that's why when he's offering sacrifice, he offers it to the God of his father and not to the God of his grandfather. Now, because of the shortness on time, I'll just speak out some of these commentaries. The Ramban asks a very basic question. He says, Rashi's only begging the question. I understand that you have to show more honor to your father than to your grandfather, but does that mean that if you have an option of showing honor to both, you should only show honor to your father? Why couldn't the pasuk have just said, Vayizbach zivachim lelokei avosav, that he offered sacrifices to the God of his ancestors, like we find in many places in Tanakh? Why? What is the specific issue about Yitzchak that where Yaakov feels he has to offer a sacrifice dafka to the God of Yitzchak and not to the God of Avraham? So this is really what I want to speak about today. But let's go on to the next pasuk. Vayomer Elokim li Yisrael b'maros halayla. Vayomer Yaakov Yaakov. Vayomer Hineini. God calls out to him and he says, Yaakov Yaakov. And this is in a vision that is happening in the middle of the night. And Yaakov says, here I am. Vayomer Anochi Hakel Elokei Avicha. I am the same God as the God of your father. Al tira mereda Mitzrayim ki lagoy gadol asimecha sham. Do not worry about going down to Egypt, because I will make you into a very great nation. Now I want to point out something that is a transition that has taken place. In Pasuk Aleph, what is Yaakov identified as? What is his name? Yisrael. And yet when God calls to him in Pasuk Beis, he calls him Yaakov, Yaakov. Okay. But Hashem promises him in Pasuk Dalet, he says, Anochi ereidi mecha Mitzrayima v'anochi alcha gamalo. I will go down with you to Egypt and I will come up with you as well. V'Yosef yashis yado aleinecha, and Yosef will place his hand over your eyes as a protective cover for you. He'll create those semi-permeable membranes between you and the outside society. But what is really going on over here? If you take a look at the Al-Shich, we're only going to be able to extract a portion of the Al-Shich over here. And the Al-Shich very poignantly describes the anxiety that Yaakov Avinu was having, realizing that he now needs to go down to Egypt. He says, Ki hinei al shnei divarim haya yarei Yaakov ma'od vayetzer lo. There were two issues that was causing Yaakov a lot of anxiety and pain. Aleph al riboy zaro. He was concerned that the promise that he should have a very large and multitudinous nation descend from him should come true. And Beis al hayoso gole Mitzrayima. The fact that he realized that he was now going into Galus and he was going down to Egypt. Omer bilibo. And this is what he's saying. He's saying to himself, I must be inferior to my father Yitzchak in the sense that I am now being denied these two things. Ki halo b've'er sheva ne'emar li Yitzchak al tira ki itecha anochi uve'rachticha v'hirbesi azaracha ba'avur Avraham avdi that God had promised Yitzchak in this very same place of Be'er Sheva. He said, don't worry, Yitzchak, I'm always going to be with you. I'm going to increase your descendants. Shehi birkas ve'escha l'goy gadol, v'sham ne'emar sheyihyeh ba'aretz. And God, when he promised Yitzchak that he was going to make him into a multitudinous nation, he said, but you're going to stay here in Eretz Yisrael. V'hinei riboy zera ha'amur b've'er sheva liyitzchak hu al Yaakov. Ve'ata haya ro'eh ki b'mesei ma'at hayo yored Mitzrayma ve'ech yitkayem hariboy b'li zuchut Eretz Yisrael v'gam al yedei shibud ha'mema'et et hazera. His concern was like this. If God promised my father Yitzchak that he's going to have a multitudinous nation, it starts with me. I have to be now responsible for building a great nation to fulfill that promise. But how's that going to happen? I'm now going down to Egypt. I'm not going to have the special security of living in Eretz Yisrael, which guarantees you tremendous blessing. And also my children are going to be enslaved. How are they going to be able to have multiple children if they're a slave class and they're going to be constantly oppressed and persecuted? You see, Yaakov did not have the foresight to know that the more that the Jews would be enslaved, the more that they would be able to grow and populate. He thought that going down to Egypt was going to be a subversion of the promise that was made to my father Yitzchak, and that's why I'm so upset. The second thing that he's upset with, al mitzius heyoso gole chutz la'aretz, the fact that I'm being sent out of Eretz Yisrael is tremendously painful to him. He says, Omer bilibo lama yigara mi Yitzchak. Why am I less than Yitzchak? She'amar lo hu yisparach gur ba'aretz hazos. God, after all, told my father, you, Yitzchak, stay in this land for your entire life. Never. V'hiyeh geruso gam hu ba'aretz ad yesef el amav. He says, you're going to be, Hashem told Yitzchak, you're going to be living in Eretz Yisrael for all of your days. Not once in his life did Yitzchak ever leave Eretz Yisrael. Not when there was a famine, Hashem told Yitzchak, you shall not go down to Egypt as your father Avraham did. You must stay in Eretz Yisrael, because you are the Olat Temimah, you are the pure patriarch who can never be tainted by being in Chutz La'aretz. And Yaakov says, and here I am, the son of my holy father. And look what's happening to me. Like we say in Tanakh, Eich naflu giborim. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. My father was this Ola Temimah. My father was this pure holy being of pure holiness, of pure Kedusha. And look at me now. I'm now going to Chutz La'aretz. I'm going down to Egypt to spend the rest of my life there, to die there. What happened? How have I fallen from the level of my father Yitzchak? And this is a very, very disheartening thought that any child of a great person would have. When you say to yourself, look, I look at my parents, I look at my grandparents and the values that they had and the spiritual growth that they were all about, and look how there's been a descent in that greatness when I look at myself compared to my father or my grandfather. Look how the mighty have fallen, and it's all upon me. And so Yaakov is greatly pained by this. He knows the prophecy that eventually the Jews will be as strangers in a strange land. But he thought that perhaps that would happen after he's gone, because after all, he's one of the patriarchs as well. And so this is what is causing him this tremendous angst, that he feels that he's failed in some way to reach the big shoes that his father Yitzchak had set for him to fill. And you can certainly sympathize and empathize with the angst that Yaakov Avinu is experiencing. And I think that you can look at the rest of the Alshich. We've only quoted some snippets from it. But I think that if you look at this whole idea, it's Vayizbach Zevachim Lelokei Aviv Yitzchak, that what Yaakov is doing is that God, the God of Yitzchak, why are you forsaking me? You never forsook my father. You always promised him that he could stay in Eretz Yisrael and you would always be there for him, and that he would never have to leave and go to Chutz La'aretz in order to realize his destiny. So therefore I'm appealing to that God, the God of my father Yitzchak, who was always there for my father. He's not appealing to the God of Avraham, because Avraham was the one, Avraham was the original Baal Tshuva, And you go through the generations. What happens? You have the grandfather becomes the Baal Tshuva, and he raises his kids in the holiest of environments, right? And then by the time you get to the grandkids, what happens? Someone's gone off the derech, right? So Yaakov sort of looks at himself as, oh, I'm the kid that's gone off the derech, perhaps, because I'm not as holy as my father. So he's appealing to his father, the God of his father, the God of my father, who everything was on the ascent, and now it's descending with me. I feel terrible, and please Hashem, help me, protect me, do something for me. So that's why Hashem calls out to Yisrael. He calls out to Yisrael and says, you're still Yisrael, and I'm calling out to the Yisrael that is within you. Your greatness is not diminished in any way just because you're going out to Golus. But because this vision is happening b'mar'ot halayla, it's happening in the middle of the night, your name right now is Yaakov, Yaakov. In other words, there are times when the Jewish people have to descend into darkness, and that's descend into the exile. Descend into a place of apparent distance from Hashem. And that's the name of Yaakov. Yaakov is the heel, the lowest part of the body. And sometimes the Jew has to appear to be downtrodden. But don't forget the fact that you're still always Yisrael. It's just that in this particular iteration of the history of the Jewish people, your guise in the nighttime has to be Yaakov. But I will still be with you. I am still Anochi Hakel Elokei Avicha. It's the same God. I have not forsaken you. I have not consigned you to anything less than your father. It's true that your father spent his whole life in Eretz Yisrael, and that you are going to have a different destiny from your father, but at the same time realize that it is I, the same God as your father Yitzchak. I have not changed. I have different plans for you. Your plans require you to go into places of darkness, because your destiny is to illuminate the darkness, whereas your father's destiny was to build up enough energy for that light to be everlasting within your people. But now that your father Yitzchak has accomplished his purpose, the mantle is now being placed upon you to go out into that place of darkness and to do your job as Yaakov, to be in a place of darkness, to be in a place of persecution, because there's a purpose for the Jew in that place as well. And therefore, Al Tira Merida Mitzrayim. Don't worry. Number one, Ki L'goy Gadol Asimcha Sham, I'll make you into a multitudinous nation. You'll see the growth will be miraculous. And furthermore, the same God of Yitzchak, I will go down, Anochi Eredimcha Mitzrayim. I'll go down with you and I'll come back up with you. And this is the classic Yerida L'tzorech Aliyah. You need to go down so that you can come back up afterwards. But the point that the inspiration for me, and I hope that you find it as well, is that just because we find ourselves in darker places, and we may find ourselves at different stations in life, in places where we feel distant, never despair, because Hashem is with us even in our darkest of places. Even when we feel that we're the Yaakov and not the Yisrael, Hashem is still with us. We all have a vital role to play, even in those places of darkness in the world, in our lives, and within the larger society. Even if our role is only to be able to help shine a light on someone else, we're still performing something truly great for ourselves and for all of Klal Yisrael. All right, enjoy the rest of Hanukkah.
Thank you very much. Have a nice vacation. Have a nice
Thank you.